Hi, my name is Diego Guerra. I am so excited to be here to bring you all this very thought-provoking topic. This session is titled Deaf People Leading the Way. Before I start, I'd like to quickly remind everyone, including myself, when I use the term deaf, I am using the term in an all-inclusive manner to include people who may identify as deaf, deafblind, deaf-disabled, hard of hearing, late deafened, and hearing impaired. This also includes Black, Brown, Indigenous folks, and folks who have moved to the U.S. from another country and now may be navigating the system for educational and employment opportunities. Before I proceed with this presentation, I would like to take a moment for a land acknowledgement. So today, while I am here recording this session, I am on land that is now called Minnesota. This land used to belong to the Dakota and Anishinaabe peoples. I would like to extend my gratitude to them for providing the resources which have allowed us to survive in this area. Let's now talk about the why. Why is it so important to collaborate and invite deaf people to take the lead, allowing them to steer the ship? It is important to have equitable collaboration in order to foster meaningful change. What constitutes meaningful change? Historically, and quite often, deaf people are excluded from making decisions for their own experiences and their own life in every aspect, such as education, school, employment, and so on and so on. Either they're excluded from the process or have had very marginal involvement. We want to address how we can reframe our work to ensure that we center the deaf community in our work. Oftentimes, we like to take charge and do things for other people. Supporting others is right, yes. However, we need to consider how to stop doing for other people and simply invite them to the table and allow them to take the lead. Next, we will discuss how we can have a collaborative working relationship with deaf people. Systems change can be an enormous task. So, how do we work with others to build connections with different communities and at the same time make change? Often, collaboration is a significant aspect of making change. So when we decide to take on the responsibility of making a change within the system, we need to know the root of the problem. Where does the root of any barrier stem from? Who knows best about the root causes in our field of serving deaf people? Deaf people themselves. So invest in the relationship. What does this look like? The type of relationship can vary. It could be a hearty one-on-one relationship you have with perhaps a client or a colleague who may be deaf. Ask them what works for them, what doesn't work for them. Learn about their vision of what systems transformation would look like. From their perspective, what kind of resources and services are missing? Go ahead and ask a lot of questions. Be curious. Build a relationship with your clients or group of folks you serve. You could also build a relationship with your local representatives from different deaf community organizations. While you invite them to be included in your work, check and be conscious of the power dynamics between you. Oftentimes, it is imbalanced. Historically, deaf people have had fewer opportunities. They often do not have equitable opportunities to enter the system in order to make systems change for themselves. When they attempt to make change within the system, they face barriers to finding those very jobs or positions that could change their own lives. Often, people do not allow it for whatever odd reasons. Consider how you can use your power for good. Make sure your power is dispersed to make them feel welcome and involved in this process of systems change. Balance of power can be a hard conversation to have. Nevertheless, this is something you can discuss with your colleagues, other state agencies, organizations, and your clients. talk about what it would look like to be part of a collaborative relationship. Remember to center deaf people. Make sure you center their stories, their knowledge, their input. It is important. Without them, we probably would not be able to see a bigger picture of what is not working. Sometimes we overlook things because, of course, we do not know everything. We do not have all the answers. Deaf communities out there may have answers. They may have ideas. Maybe not all will work. However, it is still worthwhile to come together and do some examination and discuss what you can do to change the system for the better. Let's delve deeper into collaboration, a balance of power, and how we can support each other. That slide states, food for thought. There is a difference between engaging with deaf people and sharing power with them. So I'd like for you to think about this. What does engaging mean to you? Take some time to think about what sharing power means to you. At NDC, we often perceive engaging as a means to connect with people, which is the first part of building a relationship to work together. Engaging is something we do often. When we connect and share information, we may find that we share a similar goal to address an issue. That elevates us to the next level, sharing. Sharing our work, our ties, our resources, services, and knowledge to face challenges collaboratively. So engaging is the first part. Next is the sharing of power, which leads to collaborative work. We often see people do a lot of work with engagement. Sometimes it ends up becoming a collaborative working relationship. We need to remind ourselves that as we share the power, we must remember who we are working with and to center that community. They can definitely steer the ship while you bolster their direction. This is a perfect example of shared power. Instead of taking over the helm and only checking in with the deaf person when you need input, help, or only when you've run into a problem, instead, invite them to take the lead, support them engaging in dialogue and collaboration. Because again, historically, deaf people have not given their input or bothered to collaborate because they were never invited to do so. They have never felt included. So we need to reframe how we do this work to make changes in the system and to serve the community. I want to acknowledge that as unique individuals, everyone has different starting points. Not everyone is at the same place. Some may be new to this field and still learning, not having met diverse deaf communities yet. Some may have more experience in this field and may need a reminder of how we can improve or strengthen our outreach with deaf communities. Like life, when you introspect and think as you navigate through your daily motions, you'll want to think about how you can step up. Now on to this new topic. Where do we start? I want to acknowledge that everyone in this audience may be at a different starting point, and that's okay. Maybe some of you just joined and started learning how to connect with different communities and how to center deaf people in your work using their stories, their knowledge, their insights, and their suggestions on how to resolve or reduce barriers. On the other end of the spectrum, some of you have many years of experience in this field, but may need a refresher on how you can improve, change, or reframe some things. I do envision this as something that we continuously navigate at all points of our careers. For instance, in our lives, we are constantly wanting to improve ourselves. And we know that this doesn't mean there is a specific final destination point where we can chalk it off as accomplished at some point. No, improvement and learning new things is a lifelong journey. This also applies to us in this career. Again, how can we center deaf people in our work? Whether you are new to NDC and are not as familiar with what we do in our partnerships, and or if you are very familiar with what we do at NDC and have spent time working with us, conversations are one of the most popular suggestions we have for the varied groups we work with. For example, we work with state agencies, local organizations, people who work in institutions or programs. The list goes on. I strongly recommend leveraging the tool of conversation because that is where we attain the information we need and find pieces to the puzzle. I'll explain the puzzle piece analogy in depth on the next slide, but for now, it's important to remember that when we collect all the puzzle pieces and put them together, it can become a masterpiece. First, we'll discuss intentional engagement with people. I want to emphasize this: intentional engagement with the goal of centering them in your work. Learn what is working and what is not working. What is missing? What can be better? A whole host of questions can be asked. Be curious and engage with people. Maybe you will notice that what works for one person may not work for another. Find out why that is and figure out how we can change that to make sure that systems include those people who may feel excluded and those who may not feel connected to the resources and services that you are working with. Unilateral engagement with the goal of only extracting information may not work. This is why it is so important to build relationships. Any type can work. It doesn't have to be the type where you text each other dissertations daily. It can just be goal setting or work on a project together. It could even be at your office with the client having one-on-one conversations, sharing thoughts. Or it could be having subsequent meetings to check in on affairs and to keep up with current events. You could have various types of relationships with the goal of consistently working to share information, resources, and services. While you are working on a project or anything you are working on from start to end, it is really important to introspect or self-assess your work, your colleagues, yourself, your partners, and so on. Ask yourselves, are we doing what we can do to make sure deaf people are invited to take the lead on this? Because they are the ones who know best how to solve their issues. We need to support and elevate opportunities for them. While you are thinking about inclusion of the deaf community, think about how you can include your strengths and use your power dynamic to keep the direction and momentum of the ship going, while deaf folks maintain a steady bearing at the helm. Also, we need to make sure we are connecting with different agencies, organizations, or other groups representing diverse people who can provide support too. Cross-state agencies are one example. If you work with VR or the Department of Education, you can connect with each other. If you know folks who have a desire to work with the deaf community, go ahead and include them in your strategy to come up with opportunities that you may create together. This is why conversations are so important. We often find that when we bring people together in a room, what happens is that silos are dismantled. Usually, conversations leave people in awe because they realize the resources and what they need is available right in their own town. Folks typically seek further connections and dialogue. We see this repeatedly. Please take the time to engage with people. Text someone you haven't seen in a long time and ask them if there are any new updates, or ask them, hey, how can we work together on this project that's come up? Invest in this. Now for the puzzle analogy. We know when we put together a puzzle with others, we can complete puzzles faster than on our own. Working alone takes longer, especially if one is doing a myriad of things at the same time. Understandably, one would be overwhelmed and it would take forever to complete any puzzle. Just imagine if you have 3 or 4 people working together with a mutual goal of solving a puzzle together. It can come together beautifully and with astounding urgency. Ideas and strategies from multiple people melding together is a perfect recipe for success. It is also a nice investment of time and people's relationships when they agree to work together. And when you have completed a puzzle, you examine to make sure that every piece fits properly. Here you can ask, did the input work? Did it not work? How have these action items impacted the outcome? This is the analogy for the slide with the puzzle pieces. Invite, include, implement, input, along with continuous refinement. Once a project is completed, do we throw out all the puzzle pieces? Some do and never bother to try again. Often, we like to carry forward lessons learned. You absolutely can recycle a puzzle, but it is critical to understand that a puzzle is not to be assembled and carried around. A puzzle must come apart in order to be reused with different people or maybe even used with the same folks you have worked with to solve it in the past. Again, it is important that you not work in a silo. Invite people in and figure out how you can all work together. Invest in relationships. Envision how strategic support and innovations can cause transformation within systems so they work for everyone. Another thing I would like to mention is that often the general discussion is usually about allowing deaf people to take the lead. Yes, that is one perspective, but we want to encourage people to consider how they are making the invitation for them to take the lead, with the goal of support being supplemental or peripheral. Whereas most of the time, allowing deaf people to take the lead means to some that they watch curiously as they hand over the helm, then absolve themselves of providing any type of support. No, we need to shift our mindset on this. You are a part of the endeavor, of the work of coming together. With the strength of working together, one can impact and make a ginormous change beyond our wildest imagination. The earlier you invest in relationships, the better the long-term benefits. Now, I hope you have some thoughts about how you can reframe or create reminders to think of the big picture, to center the community, and figure out how they can support you with your work. Use your power to encourage them to do what they feel is in the best direction for their community. Expand your comfort zone. Jump out of your comfort zone and meet new people. Go to events, listen, show up, learn, be curious, peruse. And it is all right to step back and listen and support. There is no need to hijack the lead and work rushed just for the sake of urgency. Sometimes things do take time. Sometimes people do need time to think and process. That's all right. Just challenge yourself and think about how you can be part of a team that supports and centers deaf people and their knowledge in this field. No one person has all the answers. It is important to have several people together for discussion and setting up shared goals. Thank you so much for listening and thinking about this. If you'd like to discuss collaboration more in depth, please feel free to reach out to me. You may email us at help@nationaldeafcenter.org. Thank you.